We are here with John Ramdeen and Robin Black to go through all of today's news, starting off with Phil Brooks, who it was reported by MMAfighting.com that he is going to require back surgery, which he was told sometime over the last week, and this is going to push back his inevitable, or is it inevitable, debut with the UFC. And this coming after the big sweepstakes this past weekend, where we looked to have an opponent finally set for Brooks, but now this may be pushing it past UFC 200.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised, actually, if Phil Brooks competes in the UFC, given how long he's been training for mixed martial arts and suffering this injury. I mean, you look at, I think everything's been planned poorly. I think if he did want to compete in mixed martial arts and he did want to do it in the biggest stage being the UFC, this should have been all hush-hush. It should have been a conversation that he had with the executives, with Duke Roufus, to monitor his progression and to see after X amount of months or years of training how he looks. I'm not surprised he got injured. Again, I just don't expect him to compete.
You know, I agree with you, but there was just no way to know. And I'm sure people did warn him. They warned him how complicated, how dangerous. The thing with really driven people is they believe they can do whatever they set their mind to. And you can do in life whatever you set your mind to. Sometimes it just takes a really long time. And that includes being a professional athlete. If you look at the very bottom of our screen, we've got CM Punk #1 in the story, BJ Penn #2, Uriah Faber #3. That's going on everywhere. That's going on in every newsroom everywhere. And that kind of pressure is unfair. He didn't know what he was getting into. And I don't just mean the fighting. I mean all of this stuff. You couldn't know, you couldn't forecast it. In your mind, you look at the best case scenario. I'll get in there and I'll train my heart out. Duke will teach me to move my hands. I'll get better and better. I'll have this thing licked in a year. You didn't realize, oh my God, after month #1, I don't know how to throw a left hook without keeping my right hand up. You are a novice at this level. Then you add all this pressure. Then you add the fear. And then you see a guy go in there and drop this guy and look right at you. And that whole thing becomes real. And I know we said this happened a week earlier, but listen, man, he looked at our friend Ariel right in the face and discussed whether he was going to fight on UFC 199 or UFC 200. Was he lying then or is he lying now?
And you now look at where this puts this fight into perspective. Mickey Gall gets this win, his second pro fight. What do you do with Mickey Gall?
Well, he can't afford to sit on the sidelines and wait for Phil Brooks to be healthy. Again,
I don't think the UFC looked at this fight as something that they were necessarily proud of and where it puts the UFC level of competition. I don't know if they necessarily want to be throwing out Mickey Gall again. They might, but they might not want that. The only reason this fight happened was to facilitate a void of who his opponent was.
Yeah, and again, it's going to be a gamble. Okay, do we wait, put this guy, pay this guy, and wait for him to be the opponent for CM Punk? Do we put him up against another guy that's 1-0 or 3-0 in the UFC?
There's no need for that. You sign him to a UFC deal, and they get to offer the fight when they want to offer it. And if it's not now, it's maybe when CM Punk is ready. But look, man, it's a real tough sport. I was having a debate with one of the guys here in the newsroom, and I said he can't be very good. He won't have good skills. And he said, how do you know? Well, you can analyze what you learn and what you learn over amount of time, what it takes to develop each technique, how many repetitions, how you train it, how you drill it, how you work it in scrimmages. You just know thousands of fighters. You've studied thousands of fighters go this process. He can't be very good. See, Mickey Gall is too high level even for what he could be at. Never mind that 4 months now. I feel bad for him. I'm just being honest. I do. I don't think he knew what he was getting into.
Well, the recovery process is said to be 4 to 6 weeks. So a back injury is a back injury, though, and I think that everyone is kind of tempering their expectations. We move on over now to BJ Penn, he had guaranteed he would be fighting March the 5th at UFC 196. Well, the BJ Penn guarantee has now had some wiggle room. He's now looking to be fighting April the 23rd. How does this change things in regards to an opponent, and also the fact that he's going to get that much more time in Albuquerque and training for this return?
This is a bonus for BJ Penn. I mean, we're talking about BJ Penn competing in mixed martial arts. Not that long ago, BJ was retired from MMA. In my opinion, one of the pound-for-pound best fighters of all time. Ask Anderson Silva. He considers him to be one of the pound-for-pound best. So I think for BJ Penn, the more time he spends in Albuquerque with Greg Jackson and Winklejohn and all the champions that they have there at the facility, I think it's good for BJ Penn because he's been his own boss for so long. He needed to get out of his comfort zone, and I just can't wait. I don't think the opponent matters. I think there's a slew of guys that would be good for BJ Penn. Give this guy more time. Let's see what the new BJ Penn looks like.
No doubt whatsoever, this is great news because more training is better. More time acclimatizing yourself back. I mean, BJ would be the first guy to tell you he was enjoying the ice-cold beverages. He was like enjoying the time off. He looked a little swollen around the face and neck for a high-level professional athlete. I think he'll fight at 145, and I think that's right. I know people question it, and I know he didn't look too super good in the third fight with Frankie. In fact, that was one of his worst performances in years. But I don't think that has to do with the weight. His natural weight class for his frame is 145 pounds.
I think most people looked at just the way, that weird stance he had in his fight. Just a guy that did not look the same BJ Penn of old. Speaking, this can kind of dovetail into this next topic regarding Uriah Faber, because Cody Garbrandt, who is getting ready for his fight with John Lineker, he was recently on Submission Radio and discussing what's next for Uriah Faber and the idea that if he were to fight Dominic Cruz next, win that title, that he could call it a career at that point. Those aren't from Uriah Faber's, from his mouth, and we know how retirements go in MMA. BJ Penn is our first of many, many examples, but Uriah Faber is certainly looking at that aspect of his career, that certainly he has less fights ahead of him than he does behind him, and we may only see a few more fights out of Faber, maybe even one, as Garbrandt is suggesting.
Yeah, that's true, but at the same time, Uriah Faber's been in this game for a long, long time. You look at when he started his career, there was no money to be made in mixed martial arts, so he did it for the love of competition. He was a submission grappler and became a mixed martial arts champion. Now, we've had the chance to talk to Uriah Faber. This guy is very business driven, and you need money to drive your businesses, and Faber is still one of
and his business has very much been affected over the last year in the UFC.
Exactly. So I would imagine that, yes, sure, fighters talk about retirement at this stage of their career. Faber's been in this game for a long, long time, but I have a hard time believing that if he was to win the championship against Dominic Cruz, that he would hang up the gloves.
I buy it. I buy it only, not only because, but among the reasons, that's kind of a cool move.
Yeah, sure.
If you can hold up the UFC belt and say, I got what I came for, there's something cool to it. And it's also like when you talk about his business, the Team Alpha Male business is probably one of a dozen businesses he runs. Nutrition-based companies, real estate, flips houses with his father, has an amateur MMA combine, many different things he's involved with. If he removes 20 hours a week of training from his fight business, from his Uriah Faber Inc., if he removes 20 hours a week of training, that's 20 hours he can allot to all the other interests he has.
True, but at the same time, when you're talking about making the most money that you can make, you're a UFC champion making pay-per-view dollars. A fight with BJ Penn and Uriah Faber, again, it's 135 pounds.
We are just jumping to many conclusions.
Of course we are, but that's what this is. But the idea of trying to make the biggest fights possible and try to make the most money when you're at the top of the mountain.
Dude, Uriah Faber and BJ Penn at 145
yeah,
pounds.
Exactly.
Give it. Do it. Let's do
That's
it.
what I'm saying.
Yoel Romero, he was on the MMA Hour this week with his manager Malky Kawa, and I don't know how many times we have heard the tainted supplement defense that is just, usually that just means you've got nothing.
Yeah.
In this case, he did. USADA investigated this. They found the supplement that Romero took after the fight with Jacare back in December. They had it analyzed, and there was something in there that was not listed on the labels that is a banned substance. And it looks like Yoel Romero, while he may get some punishment because at the end of the day he still did put this in his body, even if unknowingly, it doesn't look like he's going to get the 2 years, which for a 38-year-old in Yoel Romero, I think that would have ended his career.
Yeah, the question I want to ask you, because I know you've done study on this, can somebody use that as a scapegoat, use it as a safety net in the sense that we're going to do these things, we know what's in this bottle or in this jar, if we get popped, we just blame it on this.
Yeah, of course. There's some brilliant work being done here.
All over stone here.
For sure.
Again, you're trying to protect
yourself. This was after the fight.
Yeah.
I understand that, but if when we're talking about the smell test.
Yeah, who says it was after the fight? He says it was after the fight.
No, they tested him after the
fight.
fight.
Yeah, I know, but he says he took the supplement after the fight, or he says he took it before the fight. Did he take it during the fight? Also, some people do know what are in these things. And where are we on this? Have they decided now at the end, yes, it is 100% to blame, or are they still in the process and say this is in the supplement? Because there are levels. How many of these pills did you take? What would be the appropriate level for this pill in your body? The jury is still out in this. However, they will be able to determine the amount in your body and based on how many pills that would require and when you took it. And if it's like, hey, this guy's telling the truth. He took 2 of these pills at this time. This is the exact measurement one would expect. And then if that's the case, I'll give him a little slap on the wrist. And if that is the case, that's all he deserves. You do have to monitor what's in your body. You have to monitor what you're taking. But if he didn't knowingly take a steroid, then give him just a slap on the wrist.
You sent us the email, and again, it should be the fighter's responsibility to know what they're taking.
Absolutely, they should. And I think all fighters out there, whatever you're taking, you should be saving a small supply of everything just in case you get called on it so that you can produce that sample to be tested. Final thing is on Wanderlei Silva. Rizin is floating out the idea of possibly matching Wanderlei Silva with Fedor Emelianenko, and Bellator just announcing on Wednesday that Wanderlei Silva will be part of their Fan Fest next week in Houston, Texas. So,
wasn't he already supposed to be part of their Fan Fest?
Well, they're promoting it.
He got pulled before?
He got pulled before, but he's contractually free now. Maybe not within the jurisdiction of the United States to be fighting, but Wanderlei Silva is circling the MMA world, and he is going to land somewhere.
Yeah, and I think according to Rizin, it's up to the fans. If the fans want to see this fight between Fedor and Wanderlei Silva, they're going to make it. Well, I have a feeling the fans are going to say absolutely yes. We don't care what Wanderlei Silva puts in his body. Let this fight take place in Japan. And if they've got the money and they can pay Wanderlei Silva and they can guarantee him a number of fights, and he says, screw North America, that's where Wanderlei Silva is going to end up.
You know what? If we're trying to talk about just the facts, Romero, they discovered that he did take this thing and did have it. That's the fact. And that's what you have to go with. You can theorize what people look like and not look like. The fact is, Wanderlei Silva has never popped. Wanderlei Silva had to walk out because he had to go to the washroom.
Yep.
He had a date or something, so he never actually got hit for anything. And if Rizin is anything like Pride, it says directly in the contract that you will not be tested for anything. That's what Pride did.
That's going to wrap up Fight News Now, but I want to let everybody know that we have a preview show as well as the main card coming up on February the 27th as Anderson Silva and Michael Bisping will meet in the UK in middleweight action as Anderson Silva returns. Catch all of your coverage beginning at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Saturday, February 27th, here on Fight News.